Imagine this. You've been feeling a little off for weeks. Your stomach aches after meals. Your favorite clothes suddenly hang looser on your frame, and by 4 in the afternoon, you're ready to collapse into bed. You tell yourself it's just age catching up with you. You tell yourself it's stress, or maybe something you ate, or just one of those things that happens once you cross 60. But what if your body isn't just getting older? What if it's actually trying to warn you about something far more serious, and you're the only one who can hear it? That's the uncomfortable truth we need to talk about today. Because there is an organ tucked quietly behind your stomach that almost never gets attention until something goes wrong with it. And by then, it's often too late to catch things early. That organ is the pancreas, and the disease we're discussing today, pancreatic cancer, has earned a frightening reputation for one simple reason. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and most people over 60 have been trained their whole lives to ignore whispers from their body. Before we go any further, take a breath. This video is not here to scare you into a panic spiral at 2 in the morning. It's here to do the opposite, to arm you with knowledge so that if your body ever does whisper something concerning, you'll actually recognize it instead of brushing it aside the way so many people do. Knowledge is the one thing that turns fear into action, and action is what saves lives. So let's talk about why this particular organ deserves your attention. The pancreas sits deep in your abdomen, behind your stomach, and it quietly performs 2 jobs that keep your entire body running smoothly. First, it produces insulin, the hormone responsible for keeping your blood sugar balanced. Second, it manufactures digestive enzymes that break down the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates you eat every single day. When this small, unassuming organ starts to malfunction, the ripple effects touch nearly every system in your body, from your energy levels to your digestion to your skin. Here's the frustrating part. Pancreatic cancer is notorious among doctors for being a silent operator. In its earliest stages, it rarely announces itself with dramatic, unmistakable symptoms. Instead, it tends to produce vague, easily dismissed complaints, the kind of thing you'd chalk up to indigestion, aging, or a rough week. That's precisely why awareness matters so much, especially for adults over 60, who statistically face a higher risk than younger people. Now, I want to be completely clear about something before we go further. Everything we're about to cover today can also be explained by dozens of far more common and far less serious conditions. Gallstones, ulcers, liver disease, thyroid problems, ordinary type 2 diabetes, irritable bowel, even simple dehydration. All of these can produce symptoms that overlap with what we're going to discuss. Having one of these symptoms does not mean you have cancer. Having several of them, especially if they're sticking around, getting worse, or showing up together without an obvious cause, means it's time to stop guessing and start asking a professional. In the next several minutes, we're going through 8 signals your body may send you, signals that deserve a conversation with your doctor, rather than a shrug and a maybe it'll go away. Stick around until the very end, because the final warning sign on this list is the one almost everyone over 60 dismisses without a second thought, and that oversight can cost precious time. Let's start with the first signal, one that often gets mistaken for something as mundane as a bad meal, persistent pain in the upper abdomen that seems to travel toward your back. Nearly everyone experiences the occasional stomach ache. You ate too fast. You had something greasy, you're a little gassy, and an hour later it's forgotten. But pain connected to the pancreas tends to carry a different signature. People often describe it as a deep, dull ache that sits high in the abdomen, just below the ribs, and then gradually creeps around toward the middle of the back. At first, it might come and go, showing up after a meal and fading by evening. Over time, though, it can become more constant, more intense, and harder to shake off. Many people notice it worsens after eating or when they lie flat, and find some relief by sitting upright or leaning forward, almost as if their body is instinctively searching for a position that eases the pressure. Of course, abdominal pain has an enormous list of innocent explanations. Acid reflux, a pulled muscle, gallstones, an ulcer. Even stress can all produce discomfort in that same general area. But here's the line to watch for. If that ache lingers for weeks, if it keeps returning without explanation, or if it's paired with any of the other signs we're about to cover, it's worth a real conversation with your doctor, rather than another bottle of antacids. The second signal is one that often gets treated as good news at first. Weight loss you didn't ask for. Picture this. You haven't changed your diet. You haven't started a new exercise routine. Yet your belt needs a new hole and your favorite jeans are suddenly loose around the waist. If you're actively working toward weight loss, shedding a few pounds is exactly what you'd expect. But unintentional weight loss, especially in someone over 60, is a completely different story and deserves real scrutiny. One reason this happens is that a struggling pancreas can quietly sabotage digestion. Remember those enzymes we talked about earlier? The ones responsible for breaking down fat and protein? When their production drops, your body may stop absorbing nutrients properly, even if you're eating. completely normally. The result is weight loss that seems to defy logic, sometimes paired with the general sense that food just isn't sitting right anymore. Again, this is far from the only explanation. Thyroid conditions, depression, undiagnosed diabetes, and chronic infections can all trigger the same kind of unexplained weight loss. But the takeaway remains consistent. If the scale keeps dropping without a reason you can point to, especially alongside stomach discomfort or fatigue, don't wave it off as a fluke. Get it checked. Now let's move into a symptom that's easy to write off as simple stress or a busy season of life. Losing interest in food altogether. Maybe meals that used to excite you now feel like a chore. Maybe you find yourself full after just a few bites. Or maybe the whole idea of sitting down to eat feels unappealing in a way that's hard to explain. A short-lived dip in appetite is completely normal, especially if you're fighting off a cold, dealing with stress, or adjusting to a new medication. But when that lack of interest in food drags on for weeks, particularly if it's accompanied by weight loss or abdominal discomfort, it's not something to simply ride out. Since the pancreas plays such a central role in digestion, when something disrupts its normal function, eating can become genuinely uncomfortable. Some people begin skipping meals without even consciously deciding to, simply because hunger itself starts to feel unfamiliar. If that sounds like something you or a loved one has been experiencing, don't file it away under getting older. Bring it up with your doctor. From here, we move to one of the more visually obvious warning signs on this list, and one that should never be ignored regardless of your age. A yellowish tint appearing in the skin or in the whites of the eyes, a condition known as jaundice. This happens when a substance called bilirubin, a byproduct normally processed by your liver and released through bile, starts accumulating in your bloodstream instead of draining out the way IT should. In some cases, a mass or blockage involving the pancreas can press on the bile duct, preventing that normal drainage and causing bilirubin to build up. Alongside the yellowing, many people also notice persistent itchy skin, which can be surprisingly uncomfortable and disruptive to daily life. It's important to understand that jaundice isn't exclusive to pancreatic problems. Gallstones, hepatitis, and various liver conditions can all cause the same yellow tint. But regardless of the underlying cause, jaundice is never something to sit on. If you or someone you love notices this change, especially in the eyes, which is often where it becomes visible first, treat it as a same-week appointment, not a someday appointment. Closely related to jaundice, and sometimes appearing even before the yellowing becomes visible, is our fifth warning sign. Noticeable change in the color of urine and stool. When bilirubin can't flow properly into the intestines the way it's supposed to, urine E can take on a dark tea-like color, while stool may turn pale, gray, or even a clay-like shade instead of its usual brown. It sounds like a small, almost embarrassing detail to pay attention to, but these bathroom observations can actually be some of the earliest clues your body offers, sometimes showing up before you notice anything else at all. To be fair, dehydration, certain medications, and a handful of liver or gallbladder conditions can also shift the color of urine and stool. But if you notice these changes sticking around rather than resolving in a day or two, it's worth mentioning to your doctor. Your body is genuinely trying to tell you something specific here, and it's one of the easiest signals to catch if you simply pay attention. We've covered 5 signals so far, but the final 3 are just as important, and in some ways, even easier to overlook because they mimic conditions that are incredibly common in people over 60. The 6th warning sign involves your blood sugar. Specifically, we're talking about diabetes that appears suddenly and without a clear cause, or existing diabetes that suddenly becomes much harder to manage despite your usual medication and diet. Sin-C, the pancreas, is the organ responsible for producing insulin. Anything that interferes with its normal function can throw your blood sugar regulation into chaos. You might notice unusual thirst that water doesn't seem to satisfy, more frequent trips to the bathroom, blurry vision that comes and goes, or persistent unexplained tiredness that follows you throughout the day. Now, type 2 diabetes is extremely common as we age, and the overwhelming majority of people who develop it have absolutely nothing to do with pancreatic cancer. That's a critical point to remember. But when diabetes shows up suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, particularly in combination with unexplained weight loss or abdominal pain, that combination is what deserves closer medical attention. It's not the diabetes alone, it's the pattern surrounding it. The 7th signal is something almost everyone over 60 has experienced at some point. Ongoing nausea, bloating, or a general sense that digestion just isn't working the way it used to. Maybe you feel sick after eating, even after small, simple meals. Maybe you're dealing with persistent bloating or an early sense of fullness that stops you from finishing a plate you would have easily cleared a few years ago. Since the pancreas supplies the enzymes responsible for breaking down the food you eat, when its function is compromised, digestion naturally becomes more difficult and uncomfortable. Most of the time, these sensations really are exactly what they seem. acid reflux, an upset stomach, or simple indigestion that responds to diet changes or over-the-counter remedies. But if digestive discomfort persists for weeks, despite your best efforts to manage it, that persistence itself is the signal worth listening to. Don't let the commonness of the symptom talk you out of getting it checked. And now, the eighth and final warning sign, the one I promised you at the beginning of this video, and the one most people over 60 dismiss without a second thought. Overwhelming, unshakable fatigue. We all get tired. A poor night's sleep, a long day, a stressful week, these things happen to everyone regardless of age. But the fatigue we're talking about here is different in character. It's the kind of exhaustion that greets you the moment you wake up before you've even done anything to earn it. It's the kind where walking to the mailbox, preparing a simple meal, or climbing a short flight of stairs suddenly feels like running a marathon. The frustrating reality is that fatigue is one of the least specific symptoms in all of medicine. Anemia, thyroid disorders, depression, heart conditions, poor sleep quality, and diabetes can all produce this same bone-deep tiredness. On its own, fatigue rarely points to anything alarming. But when severe, persistent exhaustion shows up alongside weight loss, abdominal pain, jaundice, or appetite changes, that combination changes the picture entirely. This is exactly why so many cases involving the pancreas go unnoticed for too long. Fatigue gets blamed on age, on busy schedules, on simply not sleeping well, when in reality it's one piece of a larger puzzle that's been building quietly in the background. So, with all 8 signals now on the table, when should you actually pick up the phone and call your doctor? Here's the honest answer. No single symptom on this list, taken completely by itself, tells the whole story. A single stomachache doesn't mean cancer. A few pounds lost during a busy month doesn't mean cancer. Feeling tired after a rough week certainly doesn't mean cancer. But persistent upper abdominal pain, weight loss, you can't explain yellowing skin or eyes, changes in urine or stool color, new digestive troubles that won't resolve, or exhaustion that doesn't improve with rest, especially when 2 or more of these show up together and stick around. That's your cue to stop waiting and start asking questions. Early evaluation is genuinely one of the most powerful tools available to you. And here's the reassuring part. Getting checked out does not automatically mean you're walking toward a cancer diagnosis. In the vast majority of cases, these symptoms trace back to something entirely different and often very treatable, whether that's gallstones, an ulcer, a thyroid issue, or ordinary age-related diabetes. But in the rare instances where something more serious is happening, catching it early genuinely changes outcomes. The earlier a problem is identified, whatever that problem turns out to be, the more options you and your doctor have on the table. Let's take a step back and pull everything together, because I know we've covered a lot of ground. Your body has an extraordinary way of communicating with you long before a serious diagnosis ever enters the conversation. The challenge, especially for those of us past 60, is that these early messages tend to be quiet and easy to dismiss. A little stomach discomfort here, a bit of unexpected weight loss there, feeling more tired than usual, changes in digestion that seem to come out of nowhere. It's incredibly tempting to file all of this under just getting older and move on with your day. But that habit of dismissal is exactly what allows serious conditions to progress unnoticed. Today, we walked through 8 signals worth paying attention to. Persistent upper abdominal pain that spreads toward the back, unexplained weight loss, a fading appetite, yellowing of the skin or eyes, dark urine paired with pale stools, diabetes that appears suddenly or becomes unusually difficult to control, ongoing digestive troubles that won't quit, and deep, unrelenting fatigue. None of these symptoms, on their own, is a diagnosis. All of them are common enough to have dozens of harmless explanations. But together, persistent and unexplained, they're a pattern worth bringing to a professional rather than a search engine. The purpose of this conversation was never to frighten you. It was to make you a little more alert, a little more willing to advocate for yourself the next time something feels off and doesn't seem to be going away on its own. Beyond simply watching for warning signs, there's also a lot within your control when it comes to supporting your overall health as you age. Avoiding tobacco, moderating alcohol, keeping your weight in a healthy range, staying physically active in whatever way feels sustainable for you, eating meals built around vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and lean proteins, and keeping G conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. Well managed, all contribute to a stronger, more resilient body. None of these habits offer a guarantee against any specific disease, but together they stack the odds meaningfully in your favor and support your health across the board. If there's one thing I hope you take away from the next few minutes of your day, let it be this. Nobody knows your body better than you do. You're the one who notices when something feels different, when your energy shifts, when your appetite changes, when a persistent ache refuses to go away. Trust that instinct. Don't let the word aging become an excuse to ignore signals that deserve real attention. Speaking up early, asking the uncomfortable question, booking the appointment you've been putting off, these are some of the simplest and most powerful acts of self-care available to you, and they matter just as much for the people who love you and depend on you. If this video gave you something valuable to think about, whether for yourself or for someone you care about, consider passing it along. A shared video can sometimes be the nudge that convinces someone to finally schedule that appointment they've been avoiding. And if you'd like more straightforward, practical health guidance built specifically for adults navigating life after 60, stick around, because there's a lot more where this came from. Take care of yourself, stay curious about your own health, and remember, listening to your body today is one of the simplest ways to protect the years still ahead of you.